Raymond Wallace entered the dealership as an ordinary customer, but left having completely changed the rules of the game. The manager humiliated him, unaware that he was facing the new owner of the business. However, Raymond was ready to strike a blow that would shock anyone accustomed to looking down on him. But let's go back to the beginning. The city was drowning in a sweltering haze. The hot air shimmered above the sidewalks, and cars crawled lazily down the street, reflecting the sun in their polished bodies. Raymond Wallace stepped out of his black Tesla and confidently headed toward the entrance of the luxury car dealership. Tall, fit, with impeccable posture, he looked flawless. His dark gray Armani suit fit him perfectly, emphasizing his broad shoulders and stately figure. A crisp white shirt, a silver tie, expensive leather loafers, and a gold Patek Philippe watch complemented his image of a successful businessman. A light scent of expensive cologne followed his steps, and confidence was evident in his every movement. Upon entering, he paused for a moment, scanning the spacious showroom. High ceilings, glass display cases, perfectly lined rows of luxury cars sparkling under the bright artificial light. The space was filled with a subtle aroma of leather and engine oil, creating an atmosphere of luxury and status. But Raymond was in no hurry to reveal who he really was. Today, he was here not as an owner, but as an ordinary customer. Behind the reception desk sat Brian Henderson, a white man in his 40s with noticeable signs of fatigue on his face. His light blonde hair was casually combed back, and his checkered shirt looked slightly wrinkled. His tie was loosened, and the unbuttoned top button highlighted his careless style. His gray eyes, tiredly cast down at his phone, slid indifferently across the screen. Noticing Raymond, he lazily raised his gaze, and his face instantly took on a wary expression. He quickly scanned the expensive suit but then squinted slightly, looking at the visitor's face with evident distrust. "How can I help you?" he said restrainedly, his voice sounding even but cold, as if he were speaking to someone who, in his opinion, ended up here by mistake. Brian didn't even attempt to get up from his seat, demonstrating absolute indifference. Raymond, maintaining his composure, took a few steps forward and looked around carefully, as if assessing the selection. A barely noticeable interest flickered in his eyes, but his voice remained impassive. "I'm interested in one of your cars," he said, slightly nodding toward the sports models. Henderson scoffed, smirking crookedly, and casually gestured toward the far corner of the showroom, where the budget-class cars were displayed. "Maybe something from over there would suit you?" His voice carried an overt sneer. "Those cars are within an affordable budget." He paused, deliberately scanning Raymond from head to toe, not hiding the skepticism in his eyes. Raymond froze, his face remaining calm, but deep in his eyes, a spark of restrained irritation flickered. Situations like this were nothing new to him, but each time they left an unpleasant aftertaste. Inside, he wrestled with two emotions, whether to continue the conversation calmly or put Henderson in his place with a single word. He slowly shifted his gaze from Brian to the cars, and gathering all his patience, gave a restrained smile. Raymond slowly scanned the lineup of luxury cars until his eyes landed on a gleaming black sedan in the center of the showroom, one of the most expensive models. The perfectly polished black surface reflected the soft light like a precious stone, and the elegant body lines emphasized its status and power. "Show me that car," Raymond said calmly, pointing to the vehicle. Brian Henderson, still leaning lazily on the counter, rolled his eyes with visible irritation and let out a loud sigh, as if the customer's request was not only unexpected, but also meaningless. He slowly turned, giving Raymond a dismissive look, and curled his lips into a crooked smirk. "Are you sure?" He stretched out the words with deliberate uncertainty, as if doubting the seriousness of the request. "That's a very exclusive car. He intentionally paused, hinting that the customer should consider something more affordable. "I think we can offer you something more practical," he said with exaggerated politeness, laced with thinly veiled mockery. Raymond stood still, watching him, maintaining an expression of cold composure. Inside, he felt a familiar surge of irritation, but he didn't let it show. "I said I want this particular car," he firmly repeated, looking Brian straight in the eyes. His voice was even, without unnecessary emotion, but with a determination that could not be ignored. Brian smirked, shrugging indifferently as if he hadn't taken the words seriously. He demonstratively pulled out his phone, pretending to be engaged in some urgent matter. His fingers lazily slid across the screen, and his lips moved silently, as if he were truly engrossed in business correspondence. Customers and dealership employees began to take notice. Some cast brief glances from behind the counters, while others openly observed and whispered among themselves. Tension hung in the air. Raymond could feel it in every fiber of his being. He knew what they were whispering about behind his back, what those looks meant. Doubt, bias, judgment. But he had no intention of backing down. Every word from Brian, every gesture of indifference and condescension only strengthened his resolve. Raymond took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and calmly crossed his arms, waiting. 10 agonizing minutes passed. Time crawled by like thick syrup, and the tension in the air became even more tangible. Raymond stood by the gleaming sedan, arms crossed, his patience slowly waning. Brian continued his act, pretending to be busy with his phone, occasionally throwing dissatisfied glances at him. Raymond quietly sighed, took out his smartphone, and quickly dialed a number. His fingers moved confidently, and when he spoke, his voice was short and businesslike. A few precise phrases, and within minutes, the doors of the dealership opened with a dull click, letting in a new figure. An elderly white man in an expensive dark blue suit, an impeccably pressed shirt, and a strict tie walked into the showroom with a determined step. His silver hair was neatly styled, and his face reflected composed professionalism. It was the regional director, a man whose presence always meant serious business. His confident steps echoed across the showroom, making the staff freeze with tension. Approaching Raymond, the director extended his hand with a sincere smile. "Mr. Wallace, it's a pleasure to see you. How is your visit going?" His voice carried genuine respect and warmth. Brian Henderson turned pale, as if all the blood had drained from his face. His fingers trembled, and his phone almost slipped from his grasp. His eyes darted between the director and Raymond, widening in confusion. "Wallace? You... the owner?" His voice trembled with genuine shock and fear. Raymond slowly nodded, his gaze now harsher, piercing into the manager's very soul. In his eyes there was the cold confidence of a man used to getting what he wanted. "Exactly," he said calmly, but with a steel note in his voice. "And it looks like we have some changes to make around here." Brian swallowed hard, feeling his knees weaken. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words stuck in his throat. His breathing grew shallow, and sweat appeared on his forehead. Silence engulfed the showroom. Employees discreetly watched, realizing they were witnessing something significant. Raymond stood in silence, allowing the manager to feel the weight of the situation. Raymond slowly walked through the spacious showroom of the dealership, carefully examining every detail. His sharp eyes caught things others might have overlooked. Price tags on cars that hadn't been updated in time, carelessly arranged promotional materials on the glass stands, and the hushed whispers of employees who were now visibly nervous. The atmosphere was tense. The staff understood that the moment of truth had arrived. He approached the cars one by one, asking precise, well-thought-out questions. When was the last diagnostic check performed on this model? What service conditions are offered to premium class customers? How does the staff handle special customer requests? His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable authority in it. The responses he received were not always confident. Employees nervously exchanged glances, realizing that any wrong answer could cost them their reputation. After finishing his inspection, Raymond stopped in the center of the showroom. His tall, imposing figure seemed to radiate confidence. He looked at the gathered staff, salespeople, consultants, and technical personnel. All eyes were fixed on him. Brian Henderson, standing a little apart, looked lost but tried to maintain the remnants of his composure. "I came here as an ordinary customer to see how you treat people." Raymond's voice was steady, but there was steel in it. "And I can see that we have serious issues with respect and service. This is unacceptable. We will be fixing it." The employees glanced at each other. Some nervously lowered their eyes, while others stood frozen in anticipation. Raymond paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Brian, who had hoped until the last moment that the situation would resolve itself, tried to speak. His voice was shaky, and his face reflected a mix of remorse and fear. "Mr. Wallace, I didn't know," he stammered, struggling to find an excuse, his hands trembling, his face pale. Raymond looked at him intently, his eyes becoming sharp as a blade. "That's exactly the problem," he said, stepping closer without breaking eye contact. "You didn't even try to find out. You didn't try to understand who was in front of you and what their needs were. And this isn't just your problem, it's a problem for the entire team." Brian lowered his head, realizing that there was no way out. A few hours later, the story spread across social media. A customer who had been in the showroom recorded part of the conversation and posted it with the caption, "Justice has prevailed." The video instantly gained thousands of views, sparking a heated discussion in the comments. People shared similar experiences, condemning discriminatory treatment and praising Raymond's resilience. The media quickly picked up the story, and the dealership found itself in the spotlight. Management took decisive action. Brian was immediately fired, and the entire staff was required to undergo mandatory training on ethics, inclusivity, and customer service. The new code of conduct became not just a formality, but the foundation of the company's operations. Weeks passed, and the dealership transformed. A new atmosphere of respect and professionalism attracted more customers than ever before. People came, knowing they would be treated with the attention and care they deserved, regardless of who they were or what they looked like. Raymond stood by the window of his office on the top floor, watching the steady flow of customers entering the newly improved dealership. A deep sense of satisfaction filled him. He had proven that a person's dignity cannot be measured by their clothing or appearance. True success is built on respect, honesty, and a commitment to doing better, not just for business, but for people.